Hello, and thank you for venturing on a Friday morning, last day of the conference, at 9 o'clock. You're really brave. So this is basically just a run through what we've done so far. It's been a long journey for over 10 years with the Public Health Foundation, which is now called ART UK. We've been working with them for 10 years now, or more, actually, and the ART UK, what we have today online, is actually the end of this initial journey, which started with someone producing catalogs for printing on paper. We basically Keepthinking we are based in London. We are a small agency with 10 people. We do from audience engagement consulting to website to mobile app, collections management system, and so on. We work in the UK, but also in the US, in Hong Kong, and continental Europe. So we've been going for 15 years and doing only projects in cultural environments. Now, ART UK is a complex project because the title of the session is making 3,000 collections available through ART UK. Basically, there has been a history of the project that means that the project started as an idea in 2002, and over the last, I would say now, 14 years, between different hiccups and different stages, we got to this level of having over 200,000 artwork, freshly and newly digitized by a team of photographers and coordinators across the entire country, across the entire United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. So that meant going into over 3,000 venues. And when I talk venues, we're not just talking about museums and galleries, which are probably the easy ones, because at least people are supposed to know where things are. But when you go into town halls and police stations and zoos, there are artworks hidden away in cupboards. And all of this had to be uncovered and actually photographed and catalogued. So this is a bit of a timeline of the project, starting in 2003. First results were in 2012. I mean, there was a progressive, of course, effort of digitizing all this collection and all these paintings. 2012, the digitization was completed. Initially started as a print project. It was not meant to be an online project. It was meant to be a print project. It was meant to print a number of catalogs that eventually got printed, 80 of them. And the idea of putting all of this material online came in in 2011. They started talking to the BBC. And 2008 actually started talking to the BBC. 2011, the first portal called Your Paintings was launched. And then we had the problem of doing more with it. So what happened? So this is a very simplified diagram of what the process was. There was this over 3,000 venues, over a lot of people being involved, coordinated mostly as volunteers. Photographers were paid, but not much, because they had to take in excess of 70 pictures a day on average, because there was a lot of material to go through, and the quality had to be good. And all of this was then sent to the Public Health Foundation in Excel spreadsheet, and the images were high-resolution images, and we were creating low-resolution images for going online eventually at some point. And all of this process took 9 years. The bit in the middle, which is our content collections management system, is the one that actually took this entire bulk of material and made it accessible and made it publishable online. And then there are a number of outcomes on the other side. Of course, the main outcome at the moment is ART UK, is the public website. We will look at it. We'll look at it in a minute. But the problem is that you can imagine this effort, even in 9 years, cataloging 200,000 paintings, photographing 200,000 paintings and cataloging them, meant that not much information could be captured about them. It had to be done fast, so you could get the dimensions, you could get the artist when the artist was available, when the artist was known, and you could get location and so on and so forth, but not a lot of metadata was captured, especially when it came to subjects. So in terms of searchability, we had a problem, because these paintings were only searched by location or by artist or by dimension, if you were so inclined. So a parallel project was launched in 2011 called Tagger, that was a crowdsourcing project that involved, to date, about 12,000 people. We generate about 8 million tags, and so far we've completed probably in the region of 30,000 paintings completely tagged. And that meant that people were going in and compete with each other to identify whether a picture of a cat or a tree or a cow or a car. So making all of this much more searchable. Later, there was a second project called Art Detective, which was to crowdsourcing on a more curatorial level. So identifying whether the painting that was attributed, the artist was attributed to the painting was the real artist or not. So endless discussions, not endless, but thorough discussions between experts, which were not always academic experts, but they were actual on the field expert. They actually tried to justify that the painting that was attributed to X should have been attributed to Y. And this actually led to collections changing attributions of paintings, identifying location in paintings, identifying all sorts of mysteries that were surrounding paintings. 2016, we launched Art UK. And we just launched another 2 components to it, because then there's a problem of sustainability. Because, of course, the Public Art Foundation is a non-profit that employs 5 people. They cannot manage this level of all of this going forward. So what we did was creating another 2 components to the project that actually allow the collections to manage all of this content directly themselves. They can upload new images, they can change metadata, they can go through a workflow process that allows them to actually maintain the system. So this creates a completely different scenario. So how did we do this? The design process started from audiences and then went into a full design. We talked about content management system, crowdsourcing, sustainability. I've already mentioned some of this stuff. The first and most important thing was everything that you do needs to start from your audiences. Who are we doing this for? And it was very important from the very beginning, from day one, that Art UK is not a museum website, is not for specialists, is meant to engage multiple audiences, and especially audiences that would not traditionally engage with cultural or artistic content. So it had to be very clear and very simple. The design had to be focusing on accessibility and fun, and this is why even the brand images were conceived to actually expose the fact that art can be enjoyable at any level. The content management system was crucial. We needed a system, and luckily we had one that could hold all of this together, including 4 different websites and make connection between them. Crowdsourcing, I already talked a little bit about it. It was incredibly important because in the context of sustainability, there's this one and there's the next one. In context of sustainability, we need this content to be easy to maintain and easy to be enriched and enhanced. Sustainability, again, we've created a very simple way for collection to upload new stuff that uses familiar tools, Dropbox. You upload an Excel spreadsheet in Dropbox, you log in, we see that you uploaded a spreadsheet and images, we process them. And then you can verify what you've uploaded. Having this kind of audiences meant that we needed to have a lot of different entry points. And a lot of different entry points means that you can search for an artist, but you don't really know who the artist is and know where they are. And this is the other important thing. I mean, there's all of that, and I'll make these slides available afterwards. The other important thing is that this is not a single museum, but it's actually the entire country. So a map was crucial to identify where things were. I want to know where all the Gauguins are across the country, and you can now. So one example of this is that actually we gave visibilities to very, very, very small venues. This is a zoo that no one knew about, and this zoo has one artwork. I can go through it. So this is a website. So I can go to this artwork, and I start exploring from here because I'm local to this. I'm not, but if I was, I could see that there's actually where it is, and there's actually an artwork. So I can click on that artwork, follow it through, and becomes a process of discovery. Images were very high quality, so we wanted to give them a lot of visibility. And then this painting is by James Kenneth Howard, so I can follow that link and then start exploring everything else that he has. Sorry, I clicked on the venue and I clicked on the artist. Then I can see all of his artworks. And I can see where they are. They're all over the place. So I can actually plan visits to all of this. And we don't always know where they are because sometimes the collection don't tell us, but that's a different story. But this is changing as well. And multiple entry point means also that you can go in through stories. So there's a curatorial platform that allow staff as well as guest curator to actually create online exhibition and tours that then involve and make the entire collection more visible. The issues that this project started to raise are what is the role of museum website when we have something like that, especially for small museums that don't have the ability or the budget to actually publish anything online or to maintain a collection online. This creates a completely different opportunity, and we might be exploring that in the future. And the idea of distributed collection online can open data facilitate access to this information. What is next? What's coming this month, I think, is the shop, so ability to sell image licensing, print on demand, and other type of products. So again, creating revenue for collections, not just for the organization that runs this infrastructure, because the revenue is shared with the organization, with the collection themselves. So if an image a license for an image is sold, part of the revenue goes back to the collection. And considering we have 300,000 visitors a month, this is quite a good exposure. There are other type of collection coming in, sculpture, which will create different type of problem. Also in terms of crowdsourcing, because in this case we need to crowdsource images of the actual artworks, because there's no way we can employ someone to take pictures of all the sculptures across the United Kingdom. And then the next thing that is under discussion is how do we make this more open and more accessible through linked open data. Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? I think we'll switch over and then maybe at the end if there's more questions. Next we're going to hear from Jennifer and some work at Indiana University on pre-Columbian vessels and an ontology they're working on.
Okay. And also would like to thank everyone for coming out this morning. I know it's early. My name is Jennifer St. Germain, and I'm a doctoral student at Indiana University in the Department of Information Science, and I'm also the collections manager at the Glenn Black Laboratory of Archaeology. And today I'm going to be talking about an ongoing project that we've been working on, the pre-Columbian ceramic vessel ontology, and its potential for connecting and reconnecting collections across repositories. This project began last spring when I started working with Dr. Elin Jacob and graduate students in the Information Science Department to learn how to model and build machine-readable ontologies. And because of my connection with the lab, we decided that we would try to model the domain of museum artifacts, specifically ceramic vessels. Along with the students in the class listed here, we also reached out to some of my professional colleagues at the lab, April Sievert and Megan Buchanan, for some feedback and recommendations on the project. The Glenn Black Lab is a museum and research facility and we do house roughly 4.5 million individual artifacts. Our collections are mainly representing the woodland and Mississippian cultures from the southeastern and greater Midwestern region of the United States. And while most of these artifacts were recovered from professional excavations, we also house a large number of donated collections that were assembled around the turn of the century. And collections like ours reflect a diaspora of artifacts, where over time, items from individual sites have been collected, sold, exchanged, and widely dispersed across many different repositories. And these disconnected artifacts make reconstructing and understanding their original contexts. Sorry. My apologies, I'm not sure why this is happening. Okay, artifact diaspora. So when you have these artifacts that are spread across many different repositories, it really makes understanding their original context and determining their cultural significance really difficult. They may also represent hidden collections, especially when they reside in smaller repositories, where catalogs or detailed information about artifact collections may still not be available online. And with linked data technologies, we now have the ability to reconnect these artifact collections and improve discovery and access both for professional researchers and the public. So just to quickly review what we mean by ontology in the information science realm, these are used to formally define a set of concepts that describe and represent a domain or a specific subject area. And they provide shared semantics about key concepts and make domain assumptions explicit. And used with RDF, OWL, and other semantic frameworks, they can encode this knowledge for machine processing. And then RDF statements can then be used to link data from different sources. So although this is still a work in progress, the purpose of our ontology is to provide detailed representations of individual ceramic vessels as archaeological artifacts, and it's designed to link similar artifacts and artifact collections across repositories. And ultimately, we hope that this can aid researchers in both the discovery and sharing of knowledge. So just a little bit about our process. It has been a dynamic process. We began by researching both the domain of ceramic vessels and related ontology work. We modeled primary concepts relevant to ceramic artifacts to build a controlled vocabulary and determine a logical structure for relationships among these concepts. We've also created records based on existing museum artifacts and documentation, and we continue to solicit feedback from archaeologists as we refine the model. And as I mentioned earlier, the ontology is encoded using RDF, the Resource Description Framework. And RDF allows us to really focus on the relationships and enables us to link to existing ontologies and standards. It's also easily extended and already in use by a lot of cultural heritage organizations. We are also using SCOS, the Simple Knowledge Organization System, and OWL, the web ontology language, to express more complex relationships. SCOS is a schema for implementing traditional thesaurus relationships in RDF. It has an alternate label property equivalent to the traditional use for property, which allows us to sidestep the relative lack of standards in archaeological terminology by including variant terms. And we can also use SCOS to express broader or narrower relationships to terms in other schemas. And OWL is another schema that can be used to build in more meaningful relationships between resources and create stronger reasoning ability than just with RDF. And in this example, a rim sherd is being defined as something that is both a rim and a sherd, which is something we couldn't do with just RDF alone. So building an ontology entails formally defining classes and properties. And together you can use these classes and properties to form individual statements about uniquely identified resources. And in this example, we have an RDF record which states that this specific vessel has the form of a jar, it's shell-tempered, it has 4 strap handle attachments, has an incised chevron decoration, a specific weight from a specific site, etc. And with these formally defined concepts, you can be sure that what is termed a jar in this collection will meet the same criteria for a jar in another collection. And with data in this statement format, you can then start linking artifact collections and making more complex queries, which is really what we're after here. For instance, you could potentially ask to find all of the jars with incised chevron decorations and discover items that were recovered from different areas and are housed in different institutions, as in this example here. And of course, most of the value and property labels you see here would actually be represented by uniform resource indicators, or URIs, in the record statements. So why is this type of domain-specific ontology important? Well, as we know, there are many other ontologies, schemas, and vocabularies in use in the museum community. The CDOC CRM, the EDM, the Getty AAT are some familiar examples. And although these are being widely used, they may not be able to capture the more detailed artifact descriptions that are really needed for researching these archaeological collections. And with more local schemas, there seems to be a lack of common standards across institutions. And I recently attended a Midwest Archaeology Conference where people were talking about describing their data. And while there does seem to be some overlap in cataloging methods and the terminology that people are using, most repositories still seem to be operating as silos. They're describing and capturing information about artifacts using different standards and often with different terms. And within some institutions, including my own, there may still be a lack of standards or controlled vocabulary. So at the GBL in our collections management system, we have many variant spellings of terms, synonymous descriptions, really kind of a lack of consensus terminology for the way some of these fields are being filled in. And this is, of course, a problem with many legacy collections where, over the last century, many different people have been cataloging and describing artifacts using different approaches or with different research questions in mind. So if ontologies are to be useful for describing and linking resources, they really must be built upon a shared understanding and communication of concepts within a domain. And for the archaeological community and the museum professionals that steward these collections, this requires collaboration to go just beyond local institutional standards and develop meaningful standards that can go beyond just describing things like material type and form. And we realize this will be a long-term project, of course, but we hope to continue discussing these issues and collaborating with the archaeological community as we go forward. So future work on this project will also include developing a user-friendly interface for creating, updating, and searching records. And this would include fields for free-form input and drop-down menus for both the PCV ontology and locally controlled vocabularies. And while this template here is based on the collections of the Glenn Black Lab, it could also serve as a model for potential domain repository for Midwest ceramic collections, which would provide researchers with a semantically linked way to search for artifacts across multiple collections. And we are also looking into adapting or developing applications that will allow existing collections data to be mapped to the PCV ontology. So overall, this project has been a very human endeavor. We've been learning about what works and doesn't work in terms of representing this domain, and also in terms of how to reach across disciplines to really collaborate and build a useful tool for research. Thank you.